Hello, everybody. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now joining me on CFL Talk, the other half of the talking couple, if you will, my buddy David Morassutti, whom he and I had a little interesting drive back from Toronto after the game. And I guess I'll start by saying we finally had a chance, David, to meet the players and ask them questions face to face at BMO Field.
Yes. Yeah. We've talked about this, in the past about how we feel like that we were missing something with the Zoom interviews, and yeah, we definitely did. Being and it's funny because even McLeod Bethel Thompson was the first to kind of be like, I finally get to look at your faces and look into your eyes, and I'm like, oh, okay. I- they appreciated it. There's the emotion and being able to kind of convey it different. It's so much different in person, and we had an audience.
Yeah, because we were in the BMO club on the east side.
West, yes, the east side of the
East
stadium.
side. Remember, west was the wrong side.
We almost went to the wrong side.
Yeah, it almost ended up that. Yeah, so we had people, and they paid David compliments. They said your questions were really good. That other guy, not so much.
I didn't. You're the one that made.
I don't,
I
I,
didn't say
I don't have any false bravado to share with you at this point, other than to suggest that while we were in Halifax, we also had the same situation, and he said the same thing in Halifax because we had the CFL background behind him, not the Argo one, and we did all the interviews. He really liked it. He said the same thing, so it's a little different. We'll talk about the games as usual, I guess. Well, you want to start with the Argo game?
Well, let's go. Maybe we should just go in order because they was the last game, and I'm sure we can maybe talk about the games coming up too. What's up to you? You're the
Here I'm going to be honest about my hesitation about doing the Argo game first. I think we should start. You know what? Okay, let's end on a good note. Because the Argo game for Argo fans was not a good note, and most of the people who watch this show are Argo fans. So let's jump right into the pain for them. I'm going to summarize this game. My first sentence about this game is their heads were collectively not in it.
Yeah, Ryan Dinwiddie kind of felt like the team wasn't. How did he really just he kind of felt like the team was looking past this game a little bit. It felt
He
like
hinted that might be the problem. Yeah.
yeah, or that they weren't. There was a lack of focus. There was a lack of just sheer desire in a way to
I think
really.
I think the biggest thing he said, David, was the fact that him and Pinball are going to be talking about who's going to be on this team after this week.
Well, when you're frustrated because things aren't going your way, you can take it out in a couple ways. You can kind of hold it in and not let it impact your playing on the field, or you can take some stupid penalties and totally lose control. And that's what happened in one case where
Absolutely.
the Argos still had. Now they still managed to keep the Red Blacks in the end zone on this certain situation where Chris Edwards takes two straight misconduct penalties. Although one, I was a little confused at first because he was leaving the field because he thought he got two consecutive unsportsmanlike conduct plays. Usually that results in an ejection, but because they weren't the same type of penalty, he actually wasn't ejected, and so they had to make sure that he did not go to the locker room.
Yeah, one was a misconduct. The other one was just a penalty.
Yeah. So what in that situation, what it showed me was It was just a lack of control. In Chris Edwards' case, he takes one penalty, he gets upset instead of saying, "All right, I took a penalty, it's my fault. Let's reset, worry about the thing on the field." No, let's continue to complain to the referees to the point where, oh, here comes another flag. That to me is a lot, not just a lack of discipline, but awareness, because the game was still close, but
Well,
but then the Red Blacks were like, all right, you guys are going to lose your cool. We're going to take advantage.
Montreal's coach got fired because the general manager felt that the team was undisciplined.
Ah, yes.
And now let's keep in mind that Montreal hasn't been more disciplined since the new head coach has been installed. Not much anyway. And Toronto, it really has been, if there's a consistency that they've had till this game, it was good defense. The consistency now after this game is penalties, 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 penalties. And they're finally getting to the head coach. The head coach now knows, every coach, after a coach gets fired, I can't believe they don't know it, that they don't know it happened. I think every coach in the Canadian Football League, and it'll affect each differently, of course, to varying degrees.
Right.
But everybody notices that a coach gets fired, and I suppose when the coach gets fired, you're curious as to why they get fired. And this one here, there's a couple of coaches in the Canadian Football League right now, and I've been to the games they've played the last few, and those three coaches, one down, and we know that Saskatchewan as well as Toronto, they're concerned about their penalty taking.
Yeah, I mean that the last thing you want to do is, and they keep saying it. And I think it's now we're really starting to understand why they're saying it, but it's not that the other team beat you, but you beat yourselves. We constantly hear that. We keep beating ourselves. Well, what exactly is a team going to do to not beat themselves? Right? The Argos have made it a point to say it's not any, yes, Ottawa played a good game. They made the plays they need to make. But the Argos also made it a point to say we didn't exactly we gave, like we've done many times this year, we've given them those opportunities. Well, then you obviously have no one to blame but yourselves for that. So what's going to come about it, right? And this is why some are questioning Ryan Dinwiddie's ability as a coach, because ultimately when the team is not performing and making these errors that are self-inflicting, well, it's either the player's problem or it's the coaching staff's problem, right? Like you can't blame it on, like there's only one shoe that gets dropped here, right? Either you move the player or you make a move with the coach. Personally, sometimes it's easier to move the player, but if the player is a valuable player to the team, that's something that has to be, that's a critical decision that a general manager has to make. And that's why Ryan Dinwiddie said I have to talk to Pinball about this, because clearly he's frustrated that it seems to be, he didn't really say it was the same people. He seems to be saying that this is something that is a constant issue, and he feels that maybe this is the best course of action. But right after a game, he can say that. I guarantee 2 days later, he might have a bit of a different feeling if he feels like that was kind of the emotions taking over him a little bit. Because I'll admit it, Frank, and you'll probably admit it too. You can see there was very visible emotional feeling with Ryan
Frustration
Wood.
was written all over his face.
Yeah,
And
right.
you can tell he wasn't happy either. And the word angry might even come to mind. I didn't see any anger, but there was some seething.
His first answer, there was some anger. There was a bit of anger, but also frustration. So you have to be, he knows he has to be very careful with how he approaches that, right? Because the last thing you want to do is make an emotional decision on something that needs to be a logical decision. You have to, yes, you understand that you can't just say, you know what, in that moment I was very angry. No, well, why were you angry? Really look into it and see what's the solution.
Well, what I see as the solution for this team is discipline. But how do you establish discipline on a team that has consistently had a problem with it? How do you make a team understand or believe that they should be more composed during a game as opposed to allow themselves to be set off, right?
Mhm.
Now, there is, I think, something too, if you appear to be set off in a game. I'll use Saskatchewan as an example because they talked about it, where
Mhm.
they feel there's a couple of things that happen. You do two, there's one of two things you do automatically. One is you send a message to the officials inadvertently.
Yeah.
Two, you send a message to your upcoming opponent, and that opponent can push you over the edge. I think those both those things are as possible with the Argos as well. They and I want to make this very clear. I don't think the officiating's the problem. I was just saying the perspective you can look at. And the reason I mention that isn't because I think the officials are doing something, is that you get it in your head. All of a sudden you're going, the officials got it in for us. Now what happens? Now you end up on fire a lot quicker than you would be if you didn't think that was the case. So at the end of the day, there's almost got to be a clean slate put here on this team. This team somehow has to go into that locker room, and during practice, they're going to have to hammer it into their heads. This is not about the officials. This is not about the opposing team. This is about us. We're the ones that need to change our behavior. And it isn't because other people did something wrong to us. It isn't because the officials have done something wrong to us. We have to change our behavior because it's not helping and it doesn't lead to winning. And the worst thing of all, it makes us look unprofessional. And what we saw in the interviews after the game, Shane Wright made it very clear. He talked about pride. He talked about playing the game the way they're supposed to play it. And he hates to lose. So put all those things together and you have an idea how the week's practice should go, I think.
I'm gonna also add. He says we're barely scraping by in the games we win, so we in no way. And he said in no way can the Argos think they're good enough if they're barely getting by. Really, you think the only game, was the Saskatchewan game where they won by 10, but that's
Well,
also,
that was at the end.
but also think about, the late fumble touchdown that almost,
Interception.
you take that away and they win by a field goal or the barrel. I think a field goal or 4 points. Like
Well,
they
it
haven't.
doesn't matter. They didn't dominate. They haven't dominated any team in four
No,
quarters. They have dominated teams in a half. They've dominated teams in a quarter, but they have not dominated a team in a game.
yeah,
You know, and by dominate I mean tie quarters and win the others, not lose any quarters. They have lost quarters, and they have lost some quarters badly where they really needed a couple of big plays to undo where they put themselves. So yeah, the problem with the Toronto Argonauts isn't any individual, at least from what I see. I see a problem as a team, and that's scary because that's a big fix. And not necessarily an impossible fix. That's not what I'm saying, but it's a big fix where everybody has to buy in. And I think getting rid of a player or two may initiate behavioral change amongst the majority of the players or all the team, but that's left to be seen. At the end of the day, this is a team that has to be introspective and be truly self critical and arrive at a conclusion that can only be we have to be pros. We have to play the game to the best of our ability, play the way we should play, forget about stuff after the whistle. Just do the best you can between the whistles. That's what they have to do. And I think that's what they're going to be told. And that's the fun, folks, the advantage that David and I have and others in our position that we get to listen to these players talk directly to us. Yes, they're talking into a camera. Yes, they know they're talking to you, but it's a real good feeling, as we said at the top of the show, as David pointed out, being in the same room with these guys, looking in each other's eyes. They're looking in ours. We're looking in theirs too. So
mhm. Yeah, and I think, and well, because we should also talk a little bit about Ottawa in this game too. But the last thing I'll say about Toronto too is a lot of the fans are, again, when they lose, it's the quarterback that always takes the brunt of the blame. Personally, I don't think it's just a quarterback issue, but
Not
he's
this
not
time.
exactly helping the problems either. When he has a missed throw, like, there was a easy completion down the field, likely the receiver either takes it in for the score or he gets him into scoring position. Like those things, yes, those can make a difference in, winning big or at least winning a game. But it's not the quarterback's fault when you have the offensive lineman going offside on a short yardage, or when the defensive line on a short yardage is constantly going offside, right? That's not the quarterback's problem. That to me screams more coaching and execution from a player
Let's
perspective.
say execution for now,
Yeah, that's more of an execution issue than it is a singular player problem.
or a coaching problem.
Yeah, exactly.
It's everybody.
Because you know
Execution
what?
requires good leadership, a
The
good
coach,
plan that puts players in a position to win. So if they're not executing, there's a lot of reasons why execution isn't good. I wasn't trying to take Coach Dinwiddie off, off the hook. I'm just saying that there are a lot of hooks. What you're saying, that's basically what the problem is. So at the end of the day, by definition, it's the execution. And like I said, in the locker room, they're going to have to figure out how they end up with a better executed game, right?
yeah.
Is it the game plan? Is it the players? Is it whatever? Is there an emotional state? You have to ask the question about emotions when it comes to this team. Like, are they running out on the field under a lot of pressure and they're not playing loose? That's to me, that's what this looks like. Is that you got to, in hockey we say the players appear to be squeezing the sawdust out of their hockey sticks.
Yeah.
I guess in football, I don't know. We can't really tell how hard they're gritting their teeth behind those cages that they wear. So, what is it like? Is it the execution's evidence that they're basically trying too hard, or they just don't have themselves in the mind and the position ready to play?
Yeah, and there could be many reasons for that. The players obviously take a lot of the blame themselves. They don't exactly put that on the coaches. So
We
that's
won't either.
the person who has to answer that. The only person really that needs to find an answer to that question is the general manager right now, because it kind of falls on him.
Well, he's been invited to the party.
Yeah,
He's been invited to the, he's been invited to the party. The head coach said, I'm going to look to pinball to get some help here because something's wrong in the locker room, basically, is what he said. Now, if I can, because I want to, on behalf of the Red Black fans, what a game. We were awesome. Did you see our quarterback? Who's the guy that got hurt? What's his name? Oh, yeah, Mazzoli. Well, Caleb Evans looked pretty good.
he did. No, I mean, how many times? How many times have we kind of, we've seen Caleb Evans do something similar before, right? Where he's kind of
Yeah.
thrust into the spotlight. First game he ever played, oh, Ottawa's found their quarterback. And then he kind of goes the opposite direction after. But what I saw from Caleb Evans in this game was the Argos knew this was a quarterback that needed to find his confidence.
And was mobile.
Yeah, is mobile. So they were going to try to do their best to contain him and make him beat them. And Caleb Evans said, "Okay, I'm going to do exactly that." And he did. He beat them. Right? It wasn't the Argos, they put pressure on him and he found a way out of it. He found the open receivers. Jalen Acklin.
Amazing game for him. A Toronto Argonaut hater.
Yep, Toronto. Not only a hater, but a Toronto Argos. The Argos.
Yeah, he has it in for the Argos. He does not like the Argos. The other thing is that, again, as a Red Black fan, this is what I'm saying. Boy, did we bury Harris. We took him out of the game. Our team said we are going to make sure that this isn't the reason, he isn't the reason that the Argos are going to win. They made sure that Andrew Harris was a non-factor in that game.
Yeah, because what we heard after that game against Saskatchewan was Andrew Harris right now could be a candidate for MOP in the East. An East candidate for MOP. So what did Ottawa say? All right, let's take the MOP out of it.
They
And
did.
guess what? There's a reason why you call these guys MOPs, because you see what happens when they're not at their best or when they are neutralized. So Ottawa, in a way, kind of proved that Andrew Harris is an MOP type player for the Argos. What a perfect game plan by them to keep him out, to make
Well,
him a non-factor.
that word comes out again, right? Their execution of their game plan and their intent was clear, and they succeeded.
And what it also did was it said, all right, we're gonna make sure that you guys beat us with your quarterback. And what did they do? They didn't just tell the quarterback, oh, you can sit in the pocket and take your time to make your plays. No, we're gonna be up in your face. Like, even the touchdown that McLeod threw to Brandon Banks, if he held on to that ball for 1 extra second or an extra second and a half, he would have had a defender all over him. The defender was ready to get close to him. So that's the type of pressure that McLeod Bethel Thompson faced in that game. I thought this game was probably the worst one by that offensive line, but it's also because that offensive line is banged up and
Yep.
lost their right tackle in the game. So
And they
if
weren't fully manned to start the game. They started with players playing out of position.
Mhm.
We also heard, excuse or not, that in this kind of offense, you really need to know what your job is. If you don't, you can be a little bit lost. Now that speaks to the part where the execution, maybe the plan's too complicated. I don't know.
Well, yeah, but they tried their best to bring in guys that fit the system and know the system. So at least they're not starting some of the guys from
Scratch.
zero.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the football players, they have to figure, like, they're brought in, they're being paid because they're supposed to be able to figure that out in a way. So I don't know. I feel like that's, yes, that does play a factor, but I feel like that's giving the lineman a bit of an excuse that I don't think they should get, because they're professionals. You know, some of these guys that they brought in were paid quite handsomely. When you look at how offensive linemen are paid in the CFL, the Argos made some serious investments in their offensive line. Um, so in a way, that's on the coaching staff to figure that out. That's on management to say, do we have the right guys?
Well, two reasons they did that is they wanted to help their quarterback who needs a little bit of help and a little more time to toss the ball, and they were bringing in a Class A running back, and they wanted to improve those weapons. And if the offensive line can't do their part, then it's kind of hard for the other two key players, the quarterback and the running back, to do the best they can to put the team in a good position. But I'd like to go back to being an Ottawa Red Black fan, and this is what I'm going to say. Gotta love Jalen Eklund. And his play was amazing. We talked about him not being liked. The other thing is William Powell ran for 50 tough yards. 50 yards in the Canadian Football League today is average. It's not below average. It's about average, on an average game. So, him running that, just to compare, Andrew Harris on 9 carries, pushed the ball forward 17 yards.
And he had a fumble. That was a
And,
crucial.
and he had a fumble. That's right. And that was a critical fumble.
Yeah, I mean, and Ottawa also was in a position late in the game where they could tire out the defense by going with those tough run plays. Yeah, they knew that they needed. I mean, the Argos, like, this game, you look at the stat sheet, was very, very close for most of it. Like, offensively, um, Ottawa basically 399 yards, almost 400 yards. Toronto 373. That's pretty close. Ottawa did have more possession time, especially in that second half. They were really good on that second half. But I think the critical one here was their play on second down. Um, Ottawa was much better on second down. They made the plays they need to make on second down. Toronto, not as much. They were in like Ottawa was averaging 7.7. Toronto was averaging 5.8. Ottawa had a clear game plan of how to get the yards they needed to get on second down. And then on third down, too, they made plays as well. There was one play, I think it was Caleb Evans, looked like he was going to do a QB dive over the middle, and he ended up being able to walk for a couple of extra yards. Like, they clearly had the execution that Toronto did not have.
And in punt returns, they were negative. The Argos were negative. So their average was minus 0.8 yards.
You can't have like we've you know what, like you can sometimes you can get by if your kicking game isn't exactly, or
Your special teams, at least your kick returning. Yeah,
it's not like you don't have to get a touchdown on every kick return.
But you can't flip the field.
Exactly. You know, the Argos won that game against Saskatchewan last week because Brandon Banks took that punt and put the Argos and he flipped the field. He started in his own end of the half field and he took the Argos into Saskatchewan territory. He doesn't do that. Toronto has to travel a lot more, and for defense, that changes the way a defense, prepares themselves. And one thing that Ryan Dinwiddie said that credit Ottawa for being able to do, but the Toronto couldn't do, is when they had Ottawa pinned deep, they couldn't keep them deep. So often or not, Ottawa was making those plays and getting themselves out of the dangerous territory where even if they didn't eventually they had to punt the ball, they weren't punting it from deep. So Toronto was constantly having to come from, well back in
shadow of the goalposts.
Exactly. And that was another thing that Ryan Dinwiddie was clearly frustrated about.
Absolutely. And the difference is in kickoff returns, 21.5 yards per kickoff by Terry Williams. And we heard the negative number by the Argos, and Brandon Banks was the guy doing that. We haven't seen. I don't know if I can say this and not sound really like it's a big deal, but how can you not? Kick returning this year for the Argos has been almost non-existent.
Yeah, I mean
they took a receiver, in Curly Gittens, and they had him doing kick returns. He also was a running back. He was the hot hand. And like I said to the coach, at least on the good news front, Curly Gittens, or the quarterback, sorry, Curly Gittens was played an incredible game, and it's a shame because if they would have had a couple other guys that played at that level, us Ottawa Red Black fans wouldn't have been happy.
No, and I was concerned that they were putting Curly Gittens Jr. on the returns because that's where that's the opportunity for Curly to kind of get a little bit of a breather and avoid unnecessary injuries. Imagine if he got hurt on one of those, right? Guy gets unblocked, gets through, or on those plays, he's kind of something happens. Then as the coach, you have to now think to yourself, was that the right decision to make in that situation? But yeah, no, like Ottawa knows first for all too well what it means to have a great return man. I mean, when they lost Devontae Dedmon, like that, like he was. And look, I grew up at a time where the Argos had a guy like Rashard Livingston taking back kicks all the way to the end zone. Chad Owens, right, taking kicks backs, as one of the elite returners in the CFL.
Pinball Clemens.
Pinball. Well, I didn't grow up with Pinball Clemens, but yes, Pinball Clemens.
That's why I laughed because
Frank was just like, he's not gonna. He's gonna
David
make
was
the
in
field
his crib going, run, run. And his dad and mom said, he said his first word.
goal. But that's the thing, right? It's an element of the game in the CFL that you can't overlook. It remains a vital part of the CFL game.
Well, because there's not a fourth down. That literally is in the Canadian Football League. I maintain that's the fourth down that's in the Canadian Football League. It's the kick returning.
Yeah.
That's what gets you field position. Kicking and kick returning, both are interdependent and codependent and affect each other drastically. And the Argos in that score in this game, it was highlighted in bright highlighted letters. Our return game not so good. And we're watching a guy in Montreal that was on the team who may have been worthy to stay with the team, but he was unworthy and he went to Montreal and he's doing stuff, which begs the question, is it the system that's causing the problems, not the players?
I also kind of think it's the execution from the players, right? I think the systems might work, but I think the execution from the players hasn't been there. Personally, I don't think it has been.
So what about that saying, a coach has to coach so players can succeed? Or in your case, what you're saying, coaches need to coach in a way that players can execute?
Yeah. Well, they need to work on the details, right? They need to get into that film room and say, "All right, why did we not why did we lose yards on this return?" And those are the things that teams scout, right? The other team is going to scout that and say, "This is something that the Argos are vulnerable with. How can we take advantage?" Well, in Toronto's case, they got to make sure. How do we make sure that this is not something that's going to get exploited? How can we turn a weakness into something that's not necessarily going to be a strength, but that's not going to be the thing that takes them down?
Absolutely. Well, they need to do something, and but Ottawa, they look good. All off season, ever since Sean Burke was the GM of the team and he started making moves. I think we both agreed. I felt very deeply that this was going to be a much improved Ottawa team. They came into this game 0-6. They really came close a lot of times this year. They just a little misfortune, and maybe they didn't shoot straight a little bit at the end of a couple of games, and they found themselves on the losing end. I think what we saw wasn't the best Argo team, but we saw what really is, in my opinion, the real Ottawa Red Black team. We saw this team, and they were doing it with their backup quarterback coming out of training camp. So, I really like this Ottawa team. They're a team that's always had great defense. I have a lot of faith in LaPolice. I think he's a great coach, and I think he's a great offensive mind. And Benavides is not a bad defensive mind. I mean, this is a team that we saw from these coaches that had a plan that the players as a group and individuals executed very well, which was the opposite that could be said for the Toronto Argonauts in review of this game.
Yeah, that's what good coaches do, right? They, you know, people were a bit bullish on La Police. This is what happens when you stick with a coach and give him that opportunity to learn from his mistakes. And
Absolutely.
people said, "Oh, Ryan Dinwiddie got outcoached by Paul LaPolice." Ryan Dinwiddie is experience in comparison to Paul LaPolice. You can't compare. I feel like that was a very unfair. Like when I heard that, I'm like, that's a little unfair to say, because a lot of times last year, Ryan Dinwiddie outcoached Paul LaPolice when you looked at how those games.
Yeah, it's about there's a lot of things. Winning makes you look good. Losing not so much, and that's really what the issue is here. The Toronto Argonauts should have played better. They did not. They didn't play like they were paying attention to their opponent. It looked like they might have been paying attention to a game coming up soon. They were looking past Ottawa, but these are all excuses. We can talk about Toronto and how they didn't play well. I repeat, the Ottawa Red Blacks played the kind of game that we expected them to play because of the off season they had and the players they brought in and the real writing of their team, their ship, if I can use an argot term.
Yeah, and I think Ottawa. You look at that East Division. We kept saying that East Division is nothing settled yet.
Well, we thought that this was a guarantee. This was going to be one of. I thought I'm not going to drag you under the bus. I thought that this was going to be one of the best East divisions for a while. Looking back a pretty fair distance. Um, it's looking right now. If the Argos clean up their act and Ottawa's for real and Hamilton cleans up their act and Montreal is what they are, they're a pretty good team. Maybe the Eastern Division can get back that little wild card known as the crossover. Maybe they can avoid the crossover. That's what these teams are going to have to prove to themselves and to their opponents, because two teams from the East out of these four, it could be any two. I don't have any money on. I'm not guaranteeing any of these teams get in the playoffs, because what I've seen from Toronto doesn't tell me that they're a team that can finish first. What I've seen from Ottawa isn't a team that's going to finish last. What I've seen from Montreal is they're a team that could be second or third at worst. And then you have Hamilton, that if they've cleaned up their act, folks, these are the defending first place team for the last 3-4 years. So, there's no guarantee on who makes the playoffs here. And maybe if these Eastern teams make a battle out of it, it'll keep a Western team out of these playoffs. And right now, if Saskatchewan doesn't right their ship, they're going to make it possible for the three Eastern teams to make it in. If they don't right their ship, that's what could happen.
Yeah, like Saskatchewan. I mean, do you want to move on to
Yeah,
the?
let's go. Let's go to Saskatchewan. You want to talk about Saskatchewan because they're the team playing the team that's been the real amazing team, and that is, of course, BC Lions defeated Saskatchewan for the third straight game. 2 games at home, 2 games at home for Saskatchewan. That I think they've only lost 3 or 4 since Fajardo got there at home. So they lose 32-17, and against a BC team that came out, they were trying to figure things out. They didn't play well at the beginning, but then their defense kicked in, and then of course their offense, led by Rourke, just finds a way to score.
Yeah, no, that really. If you're a Saskatchewan fan, that's concerning. Look, Cody Fajardo is still not healthy. We know that he's playing with a brace, which means he's going to be playing with that all season, unless he's going to, if he needs
They
a
said
surgery or
that.
an
Yep.
operation. If he can play with that brace, he's going to play, because he gives them right now. He is their best chance to win. But the problem is the other teams in the West are not exactly the East teams, in my opinion, where you can get by with a quarterback playing so. You need your quarterback to be your best player, because in the West, you look at the teams that are at the top, their quarterback is their best
You
player.
look at all 5 quarterbacks, right? Edmonton has a problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they brought in a guy who, at least last time he was playing out of Alberta, was pretty good. Him being Arbuckle, and he's the guy the most doubtful of the greatness that is in the quarterbacks. But then the other 4, you've got Bo Levi Mitchell, Zach Caleros, and now you got this young kid Rourke, and Fajardo's up to his eye teeth with concern, where he was maybe considered the best quarterback in the West last year for a time, right? Toe to toe with Fajardo, his team's finishing first. Um, Unfortunately, they're not finishing first right now. They're a little bit behind, and there's 3 teams ahead of them. And I don't think that's what being the Saskatchewan fan for a minute. What the heck's going on with our team?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because ever since that suspension by Marino, it feels like Saskatchewan is taking they're in that position right now where I hate to say it, but Craig Dickenson might need to be looking over his shoulders, because when a team has issues like that, the coach is usually the first to get the look, unless you if you're gonna blame anyone, also the general manager has to take some of the blame, considering the quarterback hasn't exactly been given the best. He's not getting the protection that he needs to be successful.
Yeah, but then you got to also look at it, David. This is a guy who depends on running out of the pocket. So
Yeah.
he's his own worst enemy. I mean, look, he's a great quarterback. He's a strong kid, but now he's got to, and they, by their own definition, have said, well, and he has said himself, he says, I got a bum knee. They know I got a bum knee, so they go after it. The point is, whether that's true or not, just like we talk about execution, once that's in his head, and then once it's in the team's head, they start playing outside of their ability, right? And Saskatchewan right now isn't playing like the Saskatchewan Roughriders of the past couple of years. Um, you know, what we do know is that they have played well. They have a really good defense. They have some pretty good receivers. They have DBs to envy anywhere. But I think their confidence has been kicked a little bit. Those two games against the Argos, it's not as much as how the games went, it's how they ended that I think is gnawing at them.
Oh yeah, when you lose a heartbreaking game like that, especially where the team, especially the Argo game, team is shorthanded. They're playing their third string quarterback because the other two quarterbacks aren't available. They almost win that game. They were in a position to win the game, and then it all falls apart in the last few minutes of the game. That's a backbreaker. After, touchdown Atlantic, that one was a pretty even back and forth affair. But I think that last one, to lose at home like that, it really does set your team back. And then you look at your
They
schedule
followed
and
it up with it again.
then
BC
you
did
look at
the
your
same thing
schedule,
at the end of the game.
and you say, okay, we're gonna try to bounce back. Oh, we have to face the BC Lions, who have one of the hottest quarterbacks in the CFL right now. That's not going to be easy. And unfortunately, Nathan Rourke did not make it easy on them.
Absolutely not. They scored 18 points in the second half. Saskatchewan scored none, zero. And that to me was the tail of the tape. It's once the game started going and once the game plan started to, be understood and clear. BC made the changes that worked. Saskatchewan not so much.
Yeah.
They became victimized by, a young quarterback who knows how to win. We're beginning to learn that. And a defense that you better throw something different at us, because if you don't, we're going to catch up to what you're doing. And they did. BC's defense caught up to Saskatchewan. They had them figured out. And they basically were like a lion with the prey in its jaw, and the prey wasn't leaving. It was going to be inevitable the way that game was going to end, the way it looked. And not that Saskatchewan looked bad. Charleston Hughes looked fantastic, broke a record, had some really happy moments. As an individual, we saw some great football by him. The 38-year-old showed us why he's going to be a Hall of Famer and why he's marching up the list of great defensive ends. So, good things happened for them, for Saskatchewan, but the most important thing didn't happen. And that's something the fans are really starting to get frustrated with, and that is there was not a victory to be had against BC. So BC wins 32-17. David, final comments on that game?
I mean, if you look at the standings too, right? Saskatchewan, if they can't turn this around, and if Edmonton starts to figure things out, look out. They could be in the bottom of the CFL, which they don't want to be. This is a year they're supposed to host the Grey Cup. Now, what's saving Saskatchewan right now, and maybe in a way this is going to be a good thing for them. They're the crossover team right now. So if Montreal continues to falter, if Edmonton continues to falter, and if Ottawa can't figure things out, that third spot is theirs right now.
It's there. It's clearly there. Will it
Yeah.
be there is the question. Yeah, that's a big deal. On to the best game of the weekend, the one that everybody was looking forward to. Everybody's looking for the team that's went 7-0 so far against a team that only lost once, and a team that many of us thought if someone's going to knock off the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, it could be this Calgary Stampeder team. Response from Winnipeg: Zach Collaros throws 4 touchdowns. Bo Levi Mitchell doesn't throw any. Um, so, but it was a lot closer than that. These teams played well. There were 2 Ds. Kadeem Carey is, David, he has become one of the best running backs in the Canadian Football League. Top 2, top 3 max.
Yeah, top three. I would say right now he's second. I know that right now I'm going to give it to Andrew Harris as first, just because I feel like he's the most. You know what? No, because really I feel like Andrew Harris, he's top three, but I'm going to go Kadeem Carey number one because he's consistent. There isn't really a game that Kadeem Carey has not been performed. When you really look at it, the only time he did not perform was against Hamilton in week 2. Every other week he's been at almost 90. The last 4 games he's averaging over 90 yards
I'll
between
say I
90.
agree with you. Let's say he's the best running back.
I
Consistent.
think he's the best, most consistent running back in the CFL.
Absolutely. I'll give you that. A guy that improved a lot is Brady Oliveira. He looks a lot more confident out there. He looks a bit like the guy that he replaced, a
Yeah,
Canadian that
it takes
runs
time
through the
to
defense.
it takes time to take over to the starting role on a permanent basis. So
I think
he's
he's pretty much the guy in Winnipeg,
I agree.
and he showed great things. You talked about LaPolice and people bailing on him too soon, not giving him a chance to be the head coach that he can be. I mean, the coach there in Winnipeg in his second year, they were talking about getting rid of him. How would that be if that happened? How history would have changed for Winnipeg. So
Yeah.
yeah, a little patience with the coach, and I think that will go back to the coach here in Toronto and Dinwiddie. Same thing, a little bit of patience. But the problem is, like it is everywhere, it's about winning. Now, when you're Calgary and you lose the way you did by a touchdown to Winnipeg, a pretty darn good team. It wasn't that they lost because they were overrun. It wasn't that they lost because they didn't have enough talent. It wasn't that they lost that their quarterback was that much better. I think the problem with the quarterback difference here is I know the 4 touchdowns, no interceptions versus no touchdowns, no interceptions gives one the indication that there was a better quarterback in that game. I
Yeah.
still think Bo Levi Mitchell may not be the guy he was at his peak, but he's pretty close, and he can bring this team to winning. He is one of the best quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League as it sits right now, and what has happened up until now. And this game, even though he didn't throw any touchdowns, I still think he has it. And but this defense that Winnipeg has can make any quarterback look ordinary.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think you ask a lot of teams in the CFL, they will still take Bo Levi Mitchell as their quarterback. You know,
Absolutely.
that's how I feel about that.
Yeah, and I like what Mitchell did. Kadeem Carey was the guy. He scored 2 touchdowns. Good for him. Reggie Beggleton had an ordinary game for him, 5 of 10, 74 yards. And you look on the other side, Dalton Schoen, sorry. Is he looking like a good young player? I mean, this guy every game, he's doing stuff that a young guy you don't expect to do. So
But this,
dependable, like glue in his hands. I don't know.
this is why you can let a Kenny Lawler go. This is why you can let certain Darvin Adams go. This is why you can let some of these guys go, because you believe you can find that other guy to take their spot.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. And then unfortunately, in the cap world, you got to find guys that earn beyond their pay. And it's hard. The more you pay players, the harder it is for them to match, their results to what they're being paid. Because a lot of times what the players are being paid is for what they did last year. And it is what it is. I mean, I love this game. This game was really good, and the finish was something else. Like, is there a team that shows you how they can impose their will on another team more than Winnipeg? Like, basically, the way they played those last couple of minutes, we're going to win. Okay.
Yeah,
Over
no,
here.
they do it every week, and until a team stops them, you can't unseat them as the top team in the CFL.
Oh, sirree. Fantastic. 35-28. Winnipeg wins. Calgary deserves a lot of credit in that game. A really good game on their part. Our last game to talk about is the one between Montreal and Hamilton. Well, Hamilton wins 24-17. And guess what they did? They brought the Mazzoli Evans thing back. Scratch out Mazzoli. Put in a former Montreal Schultz quarterback.
I don't know what Hamilton's doing, really. They were fortunate to win this game, in my opinion, because Montreal had their chances to win this game. I feel this is more of a chance. This is a game where Montreal lost because they couldn't execute certain plays, and Hamilton took advantage. I'm not convinced on Hamilton yet, in my opinion. They're getting better. Stephen Dunbar remains a great receiver in this league. They're very fortunate that
102 yards.
he stepped up in a big way, but this is a game that could have easily have lost because, and I think it'll help to get Simone Lawrence back. I mean, their defense will be better, but if you're Montreal and you looked at how this game ended and how this game was, you are kicking yourself because they had every chance to win.
Can you imagine looking at the stats here? The leading rushers for both teams were the quarterbacks.
I mean, both teams have struggled to really get that running game going, especially now with Montreal losing their star running back. I don't blame them too much because when you lose a star running back, the next guy is going to be a significant drop down. And no offense, but that's just the reality of it.
Or he's building his game, right? And that's Antwi. That's what he's doing. He's building his game. So
Hamilton's really good against the run too. So I don't put
absolutely. But Don Jackson's 24 and Thomas Erlington, his 16. That's not enough for them. They need more than that.
No, they do.
Yeah, a good game for Hamilton. Another one of those games where Hamilton going into the third quarters in a good position. Previously, they turned around no matter how big a lead they had. Blew it. Not this time.
I guess that's probably the good thing for them is they at least kept it respectable.
Yeah, they did a great job. They deserve a lot of credit. The Hamilton Tiger Cats are coming into Toronto next week. The last time they were there, we had a brouhaha that extended beyond the players. It included the fans, and it was a real disaster, something we hope that isn't repeated next week. The excitement for Saturday is going to be palpable for sure. Next week's games are going to be a lot of fun. We'll be at that one. That one's going to be interesting. I'm dying to see how that one plays out.
This next stretch is going to be a very important stretch in the East, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, David, for doing this.
Thank you, Frank.
He's David Morassutti. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk Aaron Live Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Today we did it Tuesday. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network for CFL Talk news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer. Please check out Spanglish World. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Till next time.